DJ LeRoy.
NightWatchman, how you doing, buddy?
I'm well. How are you?
Good, man. You have a good week?
Absolutely.
All right, all right. And as a matter of fact, you know what? We did have a good time hanging out over at the Renaissance Hotel.
Yes, it was very
good
nice.
Food,
yep.
No doubt.
Mm-hmm.
So you know what? You often heard what reading is fundamental. Is that correct?
I live by it.
That's why people looking at the NightWatchman. Oh, that's you. Okay, I see. So you know what, man? Let's definitely talk about that this evening. What do you say?
Let's go.
Okay. First gentleman I want to bring out is the executive director of the Harlem Educational Activity Fund, located right there in the Teresa Hotel, man. Michael Johnson. Bring him out.
All right.
Michael.
How you doing, brothers?
Lounge.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. Yeah. Another one, focusing right there on literacy. It could only be my man. And I actually, funny enough, I think I ran into him at an event and we just struck it up. I told him I had to go into Stuyvesant, did my thing there, and he was like, look at, this guy, he might know a little something there. He might know how to read. So that could only be my man, Total Equity Now, and that is Joe Rogers. Bring him out.
All
Joe.
Right. Good evening.
Good evening, my brother.
Here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now the other, the last one, last but certainly not least, I knew him in his role as a banker, no doubt. Of course, the bank M&T, NightWatchman.
Yes, I do. Of course,
All
on
right.
the corner of 126th and Lenox.
Exactly, and it was an impressive brother then. More impressive now because he's really, really dedicated to actually bring literacy and equity to, of course, the young people in this community. And that could only be Charon Darris. Bring him out here, man.
All
right.
Hey, good evening, everybody.
All right. So you know what, gentlemen, we're going to get this popping because now, of course, I am certainly familiar with the Harlem Educational Activity Fund in my role, my daily role. So Michael, you've been there now for how long? Tell me about the journey, man. Have you always been in that space?
Thank you, DJ LeRoy, and thank you, NightWatchman, for the opportunity. August 2024 will be 2 years. Time flies very fast for nonprofit EDs, and I'm sure my fellow brothers know as well. HEAF is an amazing organization. We are actually celebrating 35 years old. Wow. I joke about being 35, and you brothers, we know when you were 35, it wasn't always completely celebratory, but it was an accomplishment, right? It was a point where you felt that at the end of the day, you created some real opportunities, you met some milestones. And so 35 years as an organization, we have been focused primarily to get kids to college. And I know right now that whole term around college is under debate. But certainly when the highest court in the land has talked about race and admissions as a big issue, we know it's important and we're fired up by it, right? So we are still committed after 35 years to make sure we start with kids in middle school, get them exposed, get them the opportunity to think about college. And as long as you plant that seed early, it stays with them. And so I'm pretty excited. I actually come from the public school system myself.
Wow.
I went to a school in Bed-Stuy, grew up actually in Marcy houses. So big shout out to Marcy.
Jay-Z!
And I had an incredible family and parents. And I often say that my parents were my HEAF, were my Harlem Educational Activities Fund. But for them, I don't know where I would be today. So at the end of the day, I'm so excited and humbled to really be a part of an organization where I am instilling the future in a lot of young people, starting in middle school. They're allowed to stay with us as long as they want, even through college.
Wow.
And it's an extraordinary experience that I'm just so humbled to be part of. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to really share a little bit more about HEAF.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you for that, Michael. And Joe, Total Equity Now, man. It's like you have to tell me about the journey, especially being that you pointed out that you guys are 100% volunteers, man. Do tell.
Volunteer run, yeah, believe it or not. 15 years in, we started as a very scrappy grassroots organization, and it was just a few years ago that we decided to incorporate, build a board, and start to do some fundraising in order to expand and enrich our programs. We're all about advancing literacy here in Harlem. Harlem has an amazing tradition of reading and writing that we don't always celebrate and advance. So you think about authors like Langston Hughes, you think about Zora Neale Hurston, you think about James Baldwin, Claude McKay, you think about Arturo Schomburg himself, Arturo Schomburg, the bibliophile for our community who preserved and promoted our history as Black people and as brown people. And so we're really pleased to connect. I love these spaces where I get to talk about literacy with other people. It's rare. I don't think I've ever been in a conversation with all brothers talking about writing. And so it's a real joy to be here. So right now we advance universal literacy. We're building collective literacy power among Black and brown folks intergenerationally. And we do that in a very creative, innovative fashion with a range of programs that I look forward to speaking about a little bit more later in the program. But we're all about the books. And we believe that Black and brown people, based on our rich traditions and the struggles that we have endured and advanced and led to make sure that we could read and write. Some Black and brown people, even though in some cases our test scores may not be what we want them to be, we'll get there eventually. This is part of who we are. This is our collective identity as Black and brown people. And we're glad to celebrate, build on that tradition, and also to provide some concrete resources that we put in the hands of families and educators and other community members in order to advance our collective goals as readers and writers.
Beautiful. Thank you for that, Joe. And Charon, man, I mean, a banker. Can I call you a reformed banker? What do I do here? The reading team, man. You got to tell me about the journey, buddy.
Definitely. So, again, and I want to echo Joe's words. It's really amazing to have this conversation this evening with these amazing brothers, all of you. Short background about, my work. I mean, I worked in finance for a number of years. I grew up in Harlem, but school wasn't easy for me. And, education was very serious in my family. My mom took it seriously. My father took it seriously. So I always knew that, because I had these great opportunities and these great people behind me, that there was a need for me to pass that forward. And so I worked in finance for a number of years, but the last 10 years I've worked in the nonprofit space. And I recently joined, well, not that recently because it's been 8 months, an organization called the Reading Team. And so the Reading Team has been in existence since 2001. It serves a little over 300 children a year. It runs 2 programs, but those both programs cover kids from pre-K through 5th grade. Teaching them all the fundamentals of reading and literacy, phonics instruction. And, if you follow the news about literacy, either here in the city or at the state level, that there's been a big pendulum swing back to phonics-based instruction. And our organization has been doing that since inception. So we have really great results because of it. We'll talk about that more a little later, but, the need to kind of continue and grow that work is very prevalent, especially for the Harlem community.
Beautiful. So one of the things that I told you that I was at an event featuring the chancellor and Charon, and he specifically spoke about that, how literally the educational system was kind of like had gotten off track in terms of instead of phonics, I guess he said something about full sentence type reading. That whole language. Thank you. So tell me about that, man. That approach.
So there became a very popular form of instruction called whole language. Maybe about 10 years ago. It just became kind of the in vogue thing. And what it basically, the premise of it is that they would teach language around recognizing the word and just memorizing what the word would mean, instead of going through the building blocks of, okay, CH makes this type of sound, CHA makes that type of sound, you know, basic phonics like many of us probably grew up with. And there were studies done, you know, over this 20-year period, and they basically realized that it doesn't work, and that phonics-based instruction, especially for the English language, is critical to be able to learn it and be literate. And so that's why you're seeing a big swing, certainly at the city level, the state, and also across the country as well, back towards phonics-based instruction.
Gotcha. And let's say, and what you heard from the reading team, Joe, would you also say Total Equity now also has that pendulum swing that Charon speaks about?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we follow it very closely, and we've you know, there are some of the organizations that are right here in our community and academia in higher ed have advanced those whole language practices, again, that have been found not to work, particularly in our communities for children in general, but particularly for children, you know, right here in Harlem and in other Black and Brown communities. So the books that we distribute, and you know, we're not instructors. We don't provide instructional programs. We promote instructional programs, and we make an effort to connect families with existing programs in the community. But we feel it's important to go with the research and to base whatever practices are in operation in our schools and our nonprofit organizations, such as the Brothers Lead Here, in what actually works for our children. And I'm glad to see the pendulum swinging. There's an excellent documentary that I watched recently called The Right to Read. I'm sure other folks here have seen it. It's traveling around the country, and it really drives home. There's a brother, I think he's out in California, and he's been with the NAACP, he's been a leading advocate for the science of reading. And I'm just glad to see, I believe, you know, and we as Total Equity now believe that Black and Brown people are the solution to the challenges that we face as Black and Brown people in communities like Harlem. So it's always great to see brothers and sisters, Black and Brown people, who are leading the charge, who are educating our families, educating our educators in some cases about best practices and about where we need to do, what shifts we need to make in order to make sure that our young people, but also our adults, let's not forget about adult literacy. I know, you know, and I hope I can contribute that perspective here, having worked in and around adult ed for some time. We as Total Equity Now, we've hosted with collaborators in the community 8 Harlem adult education conferences. And so it's really important that we focus not only on what's happening in the public school system, but also or in conjunction with our families, caregivers, parents, grandparents who can't read, either because they themselves were underserved by the school system or something happened in their life, whatever it might be. If they can't read and write well, if their literacy skills are subpar, they're not going to be able to support our young people effectively, you know, particularly our youngest children. So it really does, you know, it's cliche, but it really does take a village. And that's what 10 is focusing on, is across the board, intergenerationally, at the intersection of our school system, our community, our nonprofit institutions, our parents, our educators, and our youth activists, is bringing everyone together in order to figure out how each of us can contribute to achieve universal literacy in our community. No one of us and no sector can do this alone. And so it's really important that we have a coordinated effort in order to achieve these lofty but really achievable goals.
Nice. Well, now, certainly, you know, as a person who headed up a nonprofit for close to 8 years in the Rockaways, I certainly do know the challenges of having a good and effective board, and certainly having gone to a number of events that you guys have hosted, Michael. I know that your board is certainly committed to assisting the young people that are part of the program, and also with that, where is the feeding coming from? From the public school system, the charter school system? You tell me.
Well, thank you again for the opportunity. And I wanted to piggyback on just the two brothers that gave a conversation around literacy.
Yes.
And I applaud them, because mainly at the end of the day, even some of those young people that end up entering our doors at HEAF, starting in the summer of the 5th grade, obviously rising 6th graders, we do like to attract young students who still may struggle, right, and have the may not have the highest test scores. We're not focused on the high achieving young people. But I think the point that Joe and Charon are raising is that this is a continual process, particularly as you get to a point when those sixth graders and seventh graders are looking at high schools, and you're talking about not only the specialized exams, but all the other sort of competencies that have to happen, because high school also sets a path towards college. And so I do think this continuum is amazing, and I certainly applaud them on that. To answer your question really on the board, you know, one thing that's important about HEAF and the work that we do is that while we do believe college is a rule, we want to give every young person an opportunity to think and explore it. We are also pretty clear that it's about college and career. And let me stress that the career piece is also something that we embody very early on, and that ties to our board. The folks that are represented in our board come from some of the major companies and corporations across the globe, including Bloomberg, Barclays, related. We have a number of folks who even are supporting us in the insurance industry. Now, that's a field when you think may not be as attractive on the surface. It is an amazing field for a young African-American, Hispanic person to explore, because it is a field that is looking for diversity. So we leverage the board. We leverage that leadership because they allow us to get access to their companies and our young people at the early ages to get access and exposed to those companies at a stage that gets them excited about the potential that they could have. And then with that, right, that exploration of college that our board members expose them to, they begin to say, well, what are the skills do I need? What are the things that I need to work on? And what do I need to sort of be able to focus on to get to that point where I could land that incredible opportunity and be in that field? So that's an important thing about our board, and we certainly appreciate that. One thing I'll share too, to sort of the end with that, is that I'm sure as the other brothers know, you know, board members are crucial, particularly not only at those meetings, but the conversations we have with the board members outside of those meetings. It's the kinds of things that I think help us to be more strategic about our direction, inform them, be more mutual about the exchange, about what we see as experts in the field, to make sure that they can be ambassadors to others and invite others into the conversation, including those that we all quite well know could be funders of our efforts.
Nice. And Night Watchman, certainly, you know, I rib you quite a bit as you rib me, no doubt. And we had, I remember some weeks ago, we had a nice little show about comic book creatives, right? And that was one of the things you always had been, you know, early on in your life, been a reader of that. And have you always been in that particular space of not only comic book, but just reading in general, man? Tell me.
Well, you know, I come from West Indian family background, so we always have espoused education as a way for upward mobility. My dad did the typical New York City thing. He went to Stuyvesant and then went to City College. So you did part of it, but the Stuyvesant to City College connection is, you know, that's literally the way that so many people of modest means have come up in New York to you know, reach their bridge to the middle and sometimes upper classes. So but yeah, I always had a penchant for comics, and comics creates literacy because you have this great graphic art, but then you have this dialogue, and you know, Marvel comics in particular, but DC also, they were well written, and they created other options to kind of look into learning about literacy. I mean, there are poems that I can still quote that I read in a Batman comic, you know, 40, 50 years ago. So yes, that long, yes. So but the other thing, I want to go back to what these gentlemen were talking about with the shift toward
phonetics.
Phonics, because it makes me think about the fact that we come from cultures that have an oral tradition, and what literacy is about is translating what you know as a spoken language into understanding and being able to write the words. So that translation into understanding what, how words break down and how different things are actually pronounced that we write, it makes a lot of sense. And then it made me think about hip hop, because I think hip hop has been a way that to create interest in words and language, and you see, top hop artists, they know about meter and metaphor and a lot of things that are important in terms of understanding language skills. So I'm wondering, with these gentlemen, are there ways that you guys incorporate hip hop, which is part of youth culture for the last 50 years basically, in some of the things that you do to encourage literacy?
Anyone take that?
It reminds me of it reminds me of this experience I had at Wadley Secondary School. We had a really good relationship with the librarian there, Paul McIntosh, who was a big advocate for reading and writing here in Central Harlem in particular. And so one of the teachers, they needed help tutoring young people to prepare them for the state tests. And part of the challenge, or part of the exam, had to do with poems and analyzing poems and writing poems. And I just remember, one of the first albums I ever heard, hip hop albums, that I heard and then studied, even as I was growing up in Maine, which is not a place for hip hop, is Notorious B.I.G.'s Ready to Die.
Wow.
In this lesson, and this was my small contribution. The teacher had it on lock. I just pushed in a little bit to offer a perspective on poetry. So I was able to use lyrics from Juicy.
Yes. Wow.
And, what I was doing, because what B.I.G., what Big is talking about in that song is about coming up. And you were just talking about NightWatchman, about upward mobility. And Juicy is really about climbing that ladder. Hey, I was here. We didn't have much to eat. We didn't have clothes. We didn't have this and that. But now look at me now. And so there was another poem that was really kind of dry, kind of crusty poem from the late 1800s that they were reading. And so I was able to bring in, from that perspective, from a hip hop perspective, like how do you compare, how do you look at these two poems, this one that maybe doesn't relate in any way to your current experiences, you can't connect to it, and something that's a little more contemporary, and analyze them together. They were both about poverty. They were both struggle. They were both about coming up. And I think that's really important, is to be able to, they call it text to self-connection, to be able to see yourself reflected in what you're reading and to be able to analyze it from that perspective. I think for any of us who have been able to get through, get into text that wasn't familiar to us, that wasn't exciting for us initially, if we can draw upon our own personal experiences and see ourselves in those texts, ideally if they're texts that are about us. So for us, from our perspective, Black and Brown authors, Black and Brown perspectives, we have a whole list, Total Equity Now. If you go to totalequitynow.org/resources, you'll find 3 lists of books about Harlem. One of them for children. And most of them written by people from Harlem. So we have one list for children, one list for sort of middle schoolers or teens, and one for adults. So just going back to, your question about hip hop, I think it's really important to be able to connect these dots and to help young people develop the skill sets that allow them to do that independently, so they can continue to love and enjoy and explore their identities as readers.
Beautiful. Charon, comments?
So, I wouldn't say that we do anything that is explicitly hip hop. However, it's ingrained in the culture. And so everything from the literature that we have here, to Bob's point, I mean, we have some graphic novels. Sometimes that's a little easier to lead children into, it's Women's History Month. And around our office, we have a number of women recognized. Nice. One of the women we have recognized is MC Light.
Yes.
So, I think it's something, and the majority of our staff are women of color, African American. And so I think that is, hip hop is easily ingrained into a lot of what we do, even though it's not explicitly taught, through our instruction.
Beautiful. Michael.
Yeah. So, it's interesting that our young people teach us, right? So when they come into our buildings during the week, we're listening to what they're saying. They gather, they talk about the latest song or album or cover. What we tried to do at HEAF is try to pair up this idea of the great past and history in Harlem with what's happening contemporarily with our young people. To give you an example, we have established, and we have a curriculum writer that is working on the Harlem Renaissance right now. And in particular, nice. She's creating a 12-week curriculum that is designed to touch every aspect of that Renaissance, from the art, the music, the literature. And combined with that, the young people will have an opportunity to go visit. And I don't know if you guys, I think you're sure familiar with that. The Met is actually has a number of the art exhibits right now that are going to be available through July.
Yes.
And I got a chance to see that incredible art donated by historically black colleges, Spike Lee being one who donated some art. The point I'm getting is that he tries to embody a bit of the past, but also, really embrace the future and the present. And we leverage the young people and their voice in the process. So you can only imagine this conversation we have about the Harlem Renaissance has to tie into, well, what is the new Renaissance here? And that Renaissance ultimately is our representative of our leaders, our hip hop culture, the things that our young people particularly are gravitating to. And so the goal is that curriculum and that learning through literature, right, through reading, through the spoken art, ultimately gets blended to a point where our young people says, wow, there's nothing new, really. We are sort of the new sort of inventors of this new art and culture. And at the same time, we've gotten a great grounding, right, on what Harlem was. And I think that becomes an incredible thing. And that's what curriculum becomes. It becomes fun, exciting. And then ultimately, the kids learn something through that 12-week process.
Yes. And certainly, gentlemen, we certainly know as leaders of nonprofit organizations doing great work in communities, funders look at data. Ultimately, they want to know that a bad boy is data-driven. What is there going to be their ROI, return on investment? So, Joe, you got to tell me your program. We have facts, figures. You have data that shows the supporters that, hey, we're doing an effective job. We are making a difference in these young people's lives.
Yeah, it's really, thank you for the question. It's really important to be able to show that impact. And we're in the process, our board, our group of volunteers, we're in the process of more carefully defining our indicators and metrics so we can measure our impact more broadly. But, there's some really clear data that we've collected over the years. One of them is the number of books, for example, that we put in the hands of young people and families in our community. So through our annual Literacy Across Harlem holiday book drive, this will be our 13th year of collecting books, thousands of gift quality books every year for young people and caregivers in Harlem shelters. This past December, we provided 10 Harlem shelters in East Central and West Harlem with 3,543 gift quality books.
Wow.
Those were many, and over the span of the initiative, we've put close to 33,000 gift quality books in the hands of families, many of whom, people who grew up the way I did. I didn't have a library at home. I had to go to the library, but I didn't have books that I could actually reach out and touch, just get up from my bed and go over and grab a book off the shelf, because those weren't the kind of, that wasn't the kind of social support that we received. We received food and clothing and toys around the holidays. We get a lot of donations from churches and all that. But I was an avid reader, and so I really relate to these families and shelters who are hungry for books. And again, just think 33,000, hundreds of families have been impacted by this particular initiative, and we don't do it alone as 10. We're a conduit. So we work with 13, 14 partners. These are churches, small business owners, academic institutions, community centers, cafes, bookstores all around the community. And community members come to these locations to drop their gift quality books because they believe it's important to be able to share these resources with their neighbors who may not have their own home library. So that's just one example. We also, over the years, we've organized 8 Harlem Adult Education Conferences, I think I mentioned. So we have data from surveys from participants. These are hundreds of folks, adult learners themselves, adult educators who provide adult basic education, ESL services, high school equivalency, what used to be called the GED, essentially. So we have feedback from them saying that they met with, or they connected with another organization in the community with which they plan to collaborate in order to better meet the needs of adult learners in our community. But we are looking carefully at how can we more closely connect our inputs, our contributions to, say, test scores, right? Is that something we can demonstrably say that because we distributed our books, because we held our annual Literacy Across Harlem March, our intergenerational march, where people take to the streets and carry their books and get other people excited about literacy, and read poetry and reading circles. So that's an ongoing process for us, is to, again, more carefully define and measure our impact so that we can communicate not just to funders, but we really want to be able to share with the broader community, the people, our neighbors, how we're making a difference, and how also we hope to be able to collaborate with them in order to expand it and enrich it. So.
Beautiful, beautiful. And Charon, the reading team, do tell what kind of data?
Yeah. Let me just interject one thing. I want to give a shout out actually to the Harlem Children's Zone. In the nonprofit space, over the last 30 years, one of the great contributions that they made is just a big focus on data collection, which really helped to revitalize the industry in a lot of ways. But specific to us at the reading team, we look at 2 pieces of data, and we're very data driven. And so the first one is that we collect ELA scores for the kids in our older grades. And so that's 3rd through 5th grade for us. And so I'll just show you a quick snapshot of what that looks like. So what you're looking at here is basically the red are kids who are in our programs 2 years or more, who passed the ELA exam. Nice. In comparison to the orange, which are this is state data, it's available online. That's the number of kids in Central Harlem who passed the ELA exam. And the stark difference between these two for this most current year is we're at 80%, whereas the district on average is at around 33%. There's not magic to what we do with the reading team. It's just that kids are getting lots of extra instruction time. They're getting 2.5 hours of additional instruction 5 days a week, and that plays out over time. And so that's the first piece of data that we look at. The second piece of data that we look at is from our pre-K through 2nd grade. And so we administer a test in-house called the Terra test. It includes both a pre-test at the beginning of September, a post-test at the end of the school year in June. And we see how kids have grown in their literacy. And what we see consistently year over year is kids grow in their reading quotient by 50 percentile. So they have huge growth. But again, it's, they're putting the work in, and that plays out over time.
God, nice. Michael, same question.
Yeah. And I see this as a safe space because, both Joe and Charon are speaking to oftentimes the challenges of nonprofits to collect data and to present and share that data. We're great on the stories, right? We're great on the anecdotes, which I think should continue. But the truth of the matter is that data is a big of a challenge. HEAF, at the end of the day, we serve about 300 young people from 6th grade to including our college. And we can certainly tout that the end game of our work is 100% graduation from high school, and about 83% of our students who go to college graduate within 4 to 6 years. So we could certainly speak to that with clarity and with strength. The challenge oftentimes is what's happening in between, right? What are we seeing in terms of the progress that's happening in 6th to 7th, 7th to 8th, 8th to 9th, and moving forward towards the 12th grade? And so one of the things that's important about our organization when I came in that we had already built in, but we needed to really make it more performative was our Salesforce system. And within the nonprofit world, Salesforce may be to some degree to some organizations pretty foreign. In the business world, it's pretty clear cut. But for us, embracing that, having our team embrace the idea of data and input was so important. So I can be proud to say that we've turned the page. One, we are collecting information on kids and the attendance week to week. And we can actually see at the end of the day whether that attendance of, let's say we have 100 kids coming during that week, essentially we're seeing 50% of attendance one week and then 75% and then fluctuate. That allows us as an organization to pivot within to be able to say, well, what's going on? And then put the human side of it, where a staff member, we call a student success manager, reaches out to the parent, reaches out to say what's going on. So that in-between stuff is super important, and data helps to drive that. Also allows me to see that, to ask those kinds of questions. The other piece about the data that's super important that we're looking to develop is obviously the progress of our young people. Ultimately, when they get to a point where they are scoring well and scoring better on exams or showing improvement, we're able to track that. And the student themselves, we're actually looking to have them build their profile as well, so that we're able to see safely, of course, and secured the individual progress of our young people. So the bottom line is that, like my fellow EDs in the space, we truly believe data is important. But oftentimes the struggle is, how do you see in between and see that progress? And so I think we're making some strides there. There's more work to be done, but it's a combination of us having to think about how we tell the right story, the right data. And ultimately, I think to Joe's point, it's not just about our funders, but it's also about us to be able to pivot, to evaluate, and then to make some changes as a result of the data that we see.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Can I come in there for just a second? Conversation, Charon and Michael's contributions brought a couple of things to mind that are really important and are a fundamental aspect of our work. So, as Charon mentioned right now, and I think it was District 5 you're pointing out, I think it's on average in third grade, about 34% of our young people are reading proficiently, according to, based on state standards, learning standards. One of the things that most families in Harlem don't know, and I found this also when I used to do research around the state and around the city, one of the things you learn is that most families don't know that they have a right to additional instruction and supports under New York state law. And for example, I'll give you a very concrete example, and this is one that we're getting ready. We're working with other groups in order to develop materials to better inform families about these rights. So if you think of a community where only a third of our young people, and often it's much lower for our young Black and brown male students, usually that can be, for like 10% lower. I don't know exactly what it is for the latest round of test scores here in D5 or in D3, 5 or 6, but all of those students who are performing below state learning standards, performing below proficiency, have a right under New York state law to what they call academic intervention services. And this must be provided in the school. So all of our young people who are struggling to just, read and write effectively, they have a right to additional tutoring, additional small group support, and other interventions that are supposed to allow them to at least achieve proficiency. And most of our families don't know. Many of them are running out trying to, with their very limited paycheck, pay for private tutoring, seeking resources outside of the school because they want their child to reach their full potential. They don't know that the school system is on the hook under state law to actually provide those additional services and supports right there at the school. And so we'll be doing more this year, in particular, once with these materials we're developing, the campaigns we're developing to educate families. One other point, we were talking about data, and I want to talk about input data also for a moment. Outcome data, where our children are, how they're performing, is based on the level of resources, supports, and sort of love around literacy and other subjects that they receive. In Harlem, Total Equity Now worked with another organization called Harlem Council of Elders, also Community Education Council 5. So these are parent leaders in District 5 who are advocates for their respective schools. And then also some students, Black and brown students at Teachers College, Columbia University. We did research through the Harlem Council of Elders that revealed that about 86% of middle and high schools in Harlem were violating state law by not providing access to school library and media specialists.
Wow.
librarians, 86%. And I tell you, when I went all over the state and I did research in mostly white communities and some black and brown communities in large urban centers outside of the city, I didn't find a single middle or high school that lacked a school librarian. But in 86%, the large majority were violating the basic educational rights of our students. And if you want to develop a love of literacy, like many of us, my librarian in high school she's why I am here in Harlem today. She put me on the autobiography of Malcolm X. She put me onto The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin.
Wow.
She helped me develop a love of learning and literacy and research that continues to inform who I am and how I operate and how 10 contributes to our community's landscape today. So I think we really need to focus not just on where our children are and, there's in some cases the low test scores, and we got to remember what that's based on, because our children are brilliant. Our children are absolutely brilliant. It's only because we collectively have violated their rights. We have not mobilized the resources. We have not been role models. Carry a book outside of your bag the first day of the month is what we say is total equity. We say rock those reads. Part of who we are. This is part of our identity. So we need to get our act together as adults. And I know there are young people out there who are also holding us accountable for doing better. But let's focus on the data about the inputs and the supports that our children are not receiving in many cases in communities like Harlem. And that's not to cast aspersion on the schools. I believe that the people, the superintendents and I believe Chancellor Banks, I believe they're committed to what is best for our children, but we need to reveal the truth about some of these things so our families and educators and nonprofits can advocate effectively for the full complement of opportunities that will ensure that we achieve universal literacy here in Harlem.
Oh man, beautiful, beautiful. I saw you nodding, Michael. Do tell, man.
Yeah. So, Joe, you just opened up a bit of my past. Susan Hess is her name, and Susan and her husband are now retired in Florida. I went to Juan Morel Campos High School, IS 71 in Williamsburg, not far from where I lived. I used to walk that path on Marcy Avenue back and forth. Susan Hess was a librarian, and she not only brought us in to really encourage the love of reading. She actually, I don't know if any of you brothers remember this, she created the library squad. So wow. I was on the squad. So I had an elite status. Basically made me an ambassador, right, to other people who entered that library. So I'm pretty amazed by the data that you shared, Joe. I think that there is an accountability, right? And I also understand the balance we have to have. Chancellor Banks and others are under incredible scrutiny and they're under pressure. And particularly when you talk about government budgets being cut by 5 to 10%, that's significant. But I do agree with you 100%. The accountability needs to be there. We need to make sure that people have an awareness and understanding of what should be available to them, because across the state and across this country, it's inequitable. And so thank you for bringing that reminder of Miss Hess. And I'm going to share this to her, and she's going to obviously be jumping for joy to know that her exposure, exposing me to not only the love of reading, but to the whole system that exists within school systems is super vital. And I agree with you 100%. We got to figure out ways that nonprofits like us can be in that position. But for the school not being able to do that, to be those and providers and implementers in some cases.
Let me get a question in. So I wanted to ask you guys about the challenges of technology and how people read these days. Now we're at a point where more books are read on tablets and Kindles or on people's phones. So how does that impact how you guys deliver your programs?
Yeah, I'll hop in on that. So it's an interesting thing, for me in particular. I had a role maybe about 10 years ago where I was out in Oakland, California, and I led a digital divide organization. And so the work that we were doing was to ensure that kids would have a computer and internet access at home. And the challenge of all of it is that it was in the backyard of Silicon Valley. But there was this drastic inequity where only 25% of those homes of, the people who who don't have access to resources, etc. And so one of the things that I remember coming up at the time is people said, well, oh, kids can just read and do homework on their phones. And there is a limitation, to what this device can do. It is amazing. I mean, it's an amazing machine and computer, but there's something about the way our brains process information and having a larger screen.
Yes.
I think tablets can work, but there is something to, the tactile feel of a book that is still very, very critical for our students to be able to read and comprehend and then be able to take notes as well. And so everything can't be done on a phone. Here at our facility, we do have kids both read physical books, and they get to take home books, and we give them books, every other month as well. But we also use tablets as well. That's very much integrated. Technology is obviously not going away, but we make sure that it's intertwined into all of the instruction that we do, so that they have both experiences.
Good. Okay. Well, okay. I'm kind of thinking one of the things that Chancellor Banks also talked about was, let's say, upgrading and implementing, and on Bob's point, let's say AI. Any thoughts to that? Which is, as you say, not going away. Michael?
Yeah. One of the exciting things that we did as a result of AI technology is that really look to create a course or curriculum for our young people to get them excited about the future of AI, but obviously align with their interests. And so as a small nonprofit, in most cases, we do rely heavily on our staff, who I am totally appreciative of their work and leadership. But oftentimes we do have to outsource to organizations to help us do some of the learning. Last semester, we did an incredibly creative course called AI sneaker design, where young people actually not only had an opportunity to learn about the potential of what AI is, but be in a position to design their own sneakers as a result of that. And I do think that experience alone does get them excited and interested about technology, but then really positions them to focus on things that they love and they enjoy. And I certainly can't quote the revenue base of sneakers in this country, but I could imagine it's extraordinary. Yeah. The creation of sneakers, the branding, the connections to athletes and to sports, but to have our young people at the core be the designer, right, or be the inventor or creator of that, and using technology has been a win-win for us. We're looking to continue to explore other types of creative curriculum that definitely brings in technology as a tool, and so certainly love to hear what the other brothers are doing as well around that space.
Beautiful. Joe?
Yeah, we don't have any kind of AI. We don't have an AI component of our work at this point. And in fact, I'm trying to do as much research to understand myself and also how we can apply it as an organization. I know a couple of our board members have said we really need to think about how we can use these types of tools in order to work more efficiently. I do want to pivot back for a moment to the NightWatchman's question about digital reading or digital literacy, or reading books, if you will, on digital devices versus paper books. We are hard copy books. We have an initiative, I think I mentioned earlier, it's called Literacy Across Harlem Day. We ask everyone in Harlem, whenever you're in Harlem, you live here, you go to school here, you play here, whatever you do, if you're in Harlem, the first day of the month, which we call Literacy Across Harlem Day, we say rock those reads. Rock. What do we mean, rock those reads? That means, sometimes back when I could afford them, I used to rock Jordans. Back in the day, we rock a lot of things. We carry a lot of things because in some way they communicate something about ourselves and also about who we are collectively. So we say the first day of the month, rock those reads. Carry a book outside of your bag everywhere you go. Once you cross that border on 96 and you rise above, you cross over into East Harlem, you cross over 110th Street, right? You come down from the Heights, you cross 155th Street, you enter Harlem, take that book out of your bag. And we do that because we want everyone, particularly our young people, but other adults, in order to see themselves and to see ourselves as readers and writers. And you need the visual. You need the visual to send that message, right? So if we wear a chain or we wear a particular type of clothing that has a brand on it, right? We're sending symbolic messages to people about who we are and what we value. And so by rocking those reads, by carrying that book outside of your bag the first day of the month, we are building collective literacy identity based on our historical traditions as Harlemites, as readers and writers. And I think it's really important to be able to read online. I read online. I do research online. I read articles. I read the newspaper on my phone or on the laptop that I'm on now. But there's something about actually seeing someone else reading. It's role modeling. It's being an everyday role model for reading. And if you can't see what's on that tablet, if you can't see what's on that phone, it could be anything, right? So we're specifically focused on communicating messages about reading. And I think the other part of that, just to wrap, is that reading is not confined to books or essays or newspapers. I was having this conversation recently with someone. They said, well, young people are really into their phones and IG, talking about these things. How do we get their attention? Well, in many cases, they are reading and writing on their phones. So a caption for IG, right? You have to craft that caption in a way that speaks to your audience, that speaks to your friends, your peer groups, right? That gets people excited, that shares new information with them, right? So you're both communicating in terms of visual imagery, but you're also writing, and they're reading captions. Most people, they want to know, they see the image, but that draws them in. You want to learn more. So it's not that they're not mutually exclusive. And I think we, as nonprofit organizations, need to find ways to better blend them. And I'm glad to hear that, with Charon and Michael, that their organizations are exploring that as well.
Nice. And Sharon, with the reading team, you guys rocking that read, man? What's up?
You know what's funny about that is, for a long time I actually followed. I still do follow 10 on Twitter, and I always used to see the tagline "Rock those reads." I thought it was cool. It's good to finally meet you. I mentioned it earlier. We do book distributions every other month. It's a critical part of our work. I just want to go back to the AI piece for a quick second. And so, we are at the infancy stage of this. Infancy stage. It's like, when cell phones first came out and really started to get popular in the late 90s, early 2000s, not even when we had true smartphones. And so what AI will do and how it will influence and work and in our education system, especially K through 12, we have no idea what that's going to look like. It could be as futuristic and scientific as, kids really having, being taught by a computer by themselves. Who knows? We have no idea what that's going to look like. We don't actively engage in AI with our direct instruction. There is some back office stuff, some managerial stuff that we use it for. For example, when we have team meetings, there's great software that actually will record and then summarize in meeting notes the details. It's just listening, and it says, all right, these are the main topics for the things that you guys talked about. And that blows my mind that there's technology that can do that. And even some of the things that we write, we've used GPT to get back on it and stuff. And so it's going to be fascinating to see how different and how integrated AI is in everything that we do, and certainly education, 20 years down the road.
Gotcha.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
I want to share. I want to share some thoughts that I'd like to share with you guys in terms of, as you look forward and think about developing your AI curriculum, that just some of the basics that we know that AI does do. And you mentioned summarization, and that's one thing. AI can summarize any long document in seconds, and so it's great for summarization. It's great for research. But it's also good for when you start talking, and this also points to another part of literacy. You guys have talked a lot about reading, but writing is also important too, and teaching people the tools of writing. And I think that AI is going to reshape how people approach writing, because one of the factors about AI is the ability to ask the AI to give you a style of writing or tone of writing. So whether you want it to be very corporate or professional or conversational or humorous, or even AI can come back in a poetry form. So I think that the idea is kind of starting to figure out, how do you teach um, people who are entering that space of learning how to not only read but formulate their own ideas and express them. How do they use the AI to elevate what their thoughts are, and do some of the, the first draft work, and yet still teach them the fundamentals of how to craft writing. So I think you guys are at a point where it's really an exciting opportunity to jump in the water, because the one thing we know is that, like you said, it's so early on that there's an opportunity to come up with ways to do it that have not been implemented yet, that could be the foundation for really new styles of education.
Absolutely.
Night Watchman, you said something super important there, as it relates to even college essays and the admissions process. On the backdrop, again, we're dealing with a national agenda or national concern around race and admissions. So just the idea of identifying yourself in an application could potentially eliminate you from admissions to a school. So at HEAF, we're being very sensitive about that. And obviously the technology could be useful. But going back to Joe's point, we still want to get young people, particularly our young people who are college bound, to get to the basics of just writing, right? We can use the technology, and the technology can create style, but do the years that our young people walk through our halls from 6th grade to 12th grade, they have an experience that they can write about. They have a story they can write about. And so we do want to, at HEAF, make sure that we encourage the rudiments and the basics of writing, and that technology can be useful. It can even advance and enhance what these students are experiencing. But the core is their lives and their personal stories and experiences. Particularly with HEAF, one of the things we do have as well is a travel program where we've been implementing for about 15 years. Last year, our young people went to Ecuador. This year, they're going to Costa Rica. They're not inviting me this year, so I guess I'm gonna be home in New York. But the truth is that those exposures are stories that they can write, they can journal, they can document. And so as they get to the point of the application process, certainly we want to consider, and I think to Charon's point, be very careful and strategic about the use of AI. But the truth of the matter is that those students have nearly 11 years of experience that they can tell a college as to why they should be admitted to that college. In the backdrop, of course, of the issues around race and admission.
Absolutely. And Night Watchman, we get into that lightning round, buddy. So you know what? We're going to have some closing thoughts. What do you think, man?
Let's do it.
All right. Joe, folks want to get in touch with Total Equity Now. They want to get into the program. How do they do this, man?
Find us on IG, first and foremost. That's our dominant social media platform these days. Thank you, Charon, for following us for so many years. It's good to connect with you as well. So Total Equity Now, at Total Equity Now on IG. You can also check out those resources I mentioned on our website. So we totalequitynow.org/resources. And by the way, if you're so philanthropically inclined, we also have the donate page. So totalequitynow.org/donate. We need your support. We're expanding, we're building, we're deepening our work. It's really exciting where we're headed. So I invite you all to connect with us there. And you can also email me at jrogers@totalequitynow.org if you have any thoughts, suggestions, partnership opportunities. We're also always recruiting volunteers and also looking to expand our board. So look forward to connecting. And Sharon and Michael, look forward to connecting with you all offline and see how we can work together.
Beautiful, beautiful. Sharon, yeah, the reading team. I want to be a part. And also, Sharon, you know what I neglected it? So you know how sometimes, let's say, parents have used, let's say, after-school programs or even school as a babysitting tool. Tell me about your parents. Are your parents engaged?
So we have engaged parents. So The reality is that, of course, we have some parents who look at us as child care services. I think that's just part of how it is. But we have some parents that are super engaged. We had a parent teacher conferences earlier this week, probably for our after school program. Probably a good, a third of our parents came through to hear about the progress that their children were making. It's just a part of the process that happens.
Gotcha.
I will say one thing, just as a closing thought. It is imperative that parents read with children. Really, to try to push for probably 30 minutes a day. That process of a child reading, with a parent listening in, providing feedback and correction while they are reading aloud, that makes all the difference. You can create great pathways for your children if you just do that. Particularly, again, pre-K through 5th, 6th grade, it'll make all the difference.
Beautiful, beautiful. Michael.
HEAF.org. That's HEAF.org. Please look us up. When you become part of HEAF, you become part of our community. You get adopted into this community, and you could be with us from 6th grade to 12th grade, from 9th grade to 12th grade, and even through college. I want to make a shout out to you all for just your incredible work that you're doing. And I want to also give sort of a shout out that, on the 23rd of March, we're having a community resource fair in the building. So if you're interested in coming to be part of that community resource fair, it's an opportunity for our partners to speak about what they're doing in the community, to talk more about HEAF. HEAF has traditionally acted on a referral system, but we're now targeting a number of schools and getting back to the basics of getting to know Harlem and really getting to know our community. So if you're interested in being part of our community, we're starting with cohorts in the 6th grade and also in the 9th grade. And again, when you become part of HEAF, you become part of our family, and we support you throughout that entire journey. So thanks so much for the opportunity. And Joe and Charon, I look forward to engaging with you both as well. You're doing incredible work.
Oh, beautiful. And also, unlike last year, Michael, you and I are doing lunch. You know this already.
Yes, I can't wait.
All right. Excellent. So, NightWatchman, take us home.
You listening to Soul Lounge Primetime on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Also live streaming on YouTube and Facebook, and also on all your favorite podcast platforms. We're always on Monday night, 7 p.m. on the radio, 8 o'clock on YouTube and Facebook. And come back and find us next Monday, because we have something even more incredible that we don't even know what it is yet. Actually, maybe we do.
But we're not telling. Gentlemen, incredible show. Thank you for your service, man.
Thank you,
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.